Hi there guys, it's Adam Martyn here, and welcome to a brand new video on this fine Thursday. And I thought for this one I was going to talk to you a bit about vinyl records. Now if you've watched my channel recently, you know that I do collect vinyl. I have done for the past 5 years actually, and in recent days I've started to, I'd like to think hone my craft of collecting records, like knowing what prices to go for, what conditions to look for, and similar with the cassette guide I did a few months ago, I feel it would be a nice thing to do to do a sort of vinyl guide for any of you who are watching, whether you're fans of mine or not. Just if you're thinking about getting into vinyl, just some things to watch out for. Now this is going to be more of a buyer's guide sort of thing. This isn't going to be like a how to use guide, because I could talk about the technical side of it for hours, but there's many other channels that do a much better in-depth job, particularly Vinylize. So if you like vinyl and you want to know how to get the best equipment, the best setup, the best sound, definitely check out the videos on Vinylize's channel. So what I want to talk about mainly is how you get your records. I mean, now there's several different ways. You can get them from a mainstream retailer like HMV or even your local supermarket sometimes. You can get them from independent record shops, which seem to be popping up more and more. You can get them at a standard car boot sale, buy vinyl second hand, or you can go to specific record fairs, which are for the purpose of selling on vinyl and also different mediums like cassettes and CDs too. Now there are pros and cons to each of these mediums, and this is just my opinion on each of them. The pros of buying new from somewhere like HMV or your supermarket is, of course, you are getting a vinyl brand new and sealed, so there shouldn't be any damage to the record itself or the sleeve, etc. The main downside I find can be the pricing. It has gotten better in recent years, but when HMV, for example, started really pushing vinyl, some of the prices they charged for those albums I thought, quite frankly, were absolutely ridiculous. So it has, I'd say it has got better, but if you're buying from there, you've just got to know what you're buying, so to speak. Just do some research beforehand. The benefits of independent record shops is often they have much more variety. You're going to get mainstream artists, but you're also going to get artists from a long, long time ago, which is great if you're into that sort of thing. The downside again is I would argue some independent record shops like to overcharge what they have. They might rely on the fact that the consumer doesn't know the worth of some albums in the hope that they'll pay more for an album than realistically they probably should. The benefits of a car boot sale is you can often get vinyl for absolute dirt cheap. I'm talking you can buy albums from as little as 50p sometimes, singles for like 10p. You can really get a good bargain there. The downside of car boots is you're buying second hand, and there's nothing wrong with second hand. A lot of my collection's second hand. However, the downsides of it are, one, you might not get a lot of variety. These are people just trying to move out clutter, and a lot of the time you see the same albums popping up. And two, if they're not well looked after, then they can be very easily damaged or scuffed or whatever. But the one I want to talk about mainly is the record fairs, because in my opinion you sort of get the best of both worlds. You get a huge variety of records to pick through, and the pricing on a lot of them, at least the ones I've been to, haven't been that bad. I actually went to a record fair the other day, and now this record fair in particular happens every few months with where I am, and I like to try and put aside between say 40 and 50 pounds, just as like, that's my treat. Every few months I'll go out and I'll pick up some new records. So I'm going to show you what I picked up from this specific record fair, what kind of albums they are, and what sort of things you need to be looking out for. So to start with, I picked up quite a few albums by Frank Sinatra, the great crooner. I'm a big fan of his. So we'll start with this one. This is No One Cares, an album from 1959, and through doing my research I believe this is actually a pressing from 1959, so to have an album that's 60 years old is pretty cool. In terms of the track list, I'll show you some of them up here. So you got a few songs there. Any Sinatra or swing buffs might recognise some of them. But now I paid a grand total of 50p for this. I think you can actually see it in the sticker up there. That's right, 50p for an original copy from 60 years ago. I didn't get a chance to chat with the vendor. I don't know if he was just trying to clear stock or if he had a duplicate or something, but this is an example of a fantastic deal. Typically albums from the 50s, considering their age now, to get them in such good quality like this usually doesn't run you 50p. So if you're into any albums from the 1950s, 1960s, you see one you like, it's in good condition, it's selling for 50p, don't leave that on the shelf. You ain't going to find a better deal than that. Some more Sinatra now. So we have Sinatra and Swingin' Brass. We have Ring-a-Ding-Ding. And we have LA Is My Lady. Now, those three albums I just mentioned were all £2 each, which again, for Frank Sinatra, considering his legacy, is quite impressive. Now, these two in particular, Swingin' Brass and Ring-a-Ding-Ding, these are both from the 1960s. I believe this one's 1961 and this one is 1962. So again, nearly 60 years old now. And again, to get these in the condition they're in for £2 each, for records like that, that's a definite pickup. With LA Is My Lady, this came out in the mid-1980s. As you can see, Frank's a bit older there, and he's collaborating once again with Quincy Jones. This is one of his last studio albums, actually. And I don't actually think it got a release in the UK. At least when I was doing my research, I couldn't seem to find many UK pressings. Certainly a lot of places around Europe, but not the UK. I'll talk more about how I researched those at the end. But again, to get that for £2 is a steal. And the final Sinatra album I picked up is this one, which is Come Dance With Me. Now, I paid £3 for this one, and it's not an original pressing. I think this was released in 1959 or 58, but this is a re-release from the 1980s. Now, how can you tell what's a re-release? Well, if you have your smartphone, there's a website called Discogs which has information on all sorts of different pressings, and I'll talk more about the website at the end. But if you don't have your smartphone, there's a few things you can look out for on the case itself to see if it's a reprint. On this one, for example, the little blurb down there is actually signed and it says 1984. And this, also available on an XDR cassette. XDR was a feature introduced on cassettes in the 1980s, so this album certainly isn't from 1959, but of course it's retained the packaging, it's got all the same songs on there. In terms of pricing, £3 you might say compared to I got originals for less. You might think it's a bit more pricey, but again, consider this, Frank Sinatra as an artist, to get his stuff under £5 per album, especially stuff from the 1950s, stuff he did with Capitol, that's a good deal whether that's a re-release or not. So if you're not picky about re-releases like I am, then you can definitely go for them, but if you want the originals, just make sure you're looking out for them. Now, moving away from Sinatra to a range of other artists. Now, a lot of my music collecting and background is in the 1980s, so we're going to see a lot of artists there. Starting with Bucks Fizz. Didn't we all love Bucks Fizz with Making Your Mind Up? I know they're often seen as a joke, but if you listen to some of their albums, they're actually really good. This one, I Hear Talk, is actually their fourth studio album, released in 1984. And it's on the rarer side, obviously, as their star waned, their albums sold less and less. I paid £3 for this one. Now, is that a good deal? I would say yes, because again, if you look online, people are trying to flog it for a little bit more than that, and it's in good condition. So for an artist like that, you know, sort of the one-hit wonders, but these are their follow-up albums, if you can get them for under £5, go for it. Now, an example of an artist who's recently gained mainstream attention once again, and that is Bananarama, and this is their album True Confessions. So I picked this up for £5, and it does come with its poster as advertised, which is obviously good, and the record's in good condition. And now, is this too much? Some could argue, yeah, maybe I could have found it somewhere for £4 or £3, but here's the thing, Bananarama recently have been everywhere. They've been at festivals, they've had a new album out this year, and of course, if an artist is in high profile, their older records tend to jump up in price no matter where you go. So to get this for £5 I think was pretty good. So just be aware, if you're buying an artist's album from, say, it's their earlier work from the 80s, 70s, whatever, and if they're like big or in vogue at the minute now, just check on your pricings everywhere. Don't go spending, say, £10 on an album that if you just wait for a bit longer, you might be able to get for less than half the price. Okay, another mainstream artist I picked up was Earth, Wind & Fire. This is their 1982-83 album, Powerlight. Now, it doesn't have any recognisable hits, not to me anyway. A lot of people, you'll remember these guys for Let's Groove and September, of course, which has been memed to death. This was sort of, you know, post the disco days and their sort of waning popularity. So again, this is the first time I've seen this album in the wild, and to get it for £3, as I've mentioned before, if it's an artist whose albums didn't sell as well, or if it's towards the end of their star shining, then it's definitely good to bag them if you can find them for under £5. Now, here's an interesting one. This is Dr. Adamski's Musical Pharmacy. This was also £3. Now, who is Adamski? Adamski was a DJ. If you've heard of the song Killer, which featured Seal on background vocals, then that's your man. He looks quite wacky there, doesn't he? Someone help him. This was in the height of the, acid house scene of the late 80s, early 90s. I've been after this album for a while, but again, it's not one that you commonly see. As I said before, this is the first time I've seen it in the wild, so to get it for £3, an uncommon album, it's worth a go. Bit more rock flavoured now, here's Whitesnake with their self-titled album from 1987. Now there's some great songs on here like Is This Love, and also Here I Go Again, which is the 87 remix on this one. Now this album I paid, what was this one? Yeah, this was also £3, a lot of £3 there. And again, came in its own sleeve, which is nice. The record's in great condition. These guys, yeah, £3 for that, worth buying. Now here's an artist whose albums I've noticed have gone up massively in price in recent years, and that's Kate Bush. Now this is The Whole Story, which is actually a compilation album of her songs up to that point. I think this came out in 1985 or 1986. So you get classics like Wuthering Heights and Running Up That Hill, and also maybe stuff that were hits, but you might not have been aware of before. It's actually a really interesting album. Again, I picked this up for £3, which I'm not like the biggest Kate Bush fan, so much so that I'm not going to get all of her albums necessarily. So to have, say, 12 songs on one neat package for £3 is quite good. Because Kate Bush, she did a recent tour, and her albums, especially if you want the original albums, like the original pressings when they came out, whatever, you're going to be paying a pretty penny for those. So if you're an on-the-fence fan of any artist, really, not just lovely Kate Bush here, always try and look for compilation albums or greatest hits collections, because if you're not bothered about owning every single thing they've ever recorded, greatest hits albums like this are a pretty good thing to come by, especially for stuff like £3. Now, here's an album that I've been after for ages now. I looked online and people were charging, I thought, far too much for it, and just by chance in the wild at this record fair I find it for the first time, and it's Black Box with their album Dreamland. Now, who are Black Box? Do you remember the song Ride on Time at the end of the 80s, one of the biggest songs of that year, of 1989? Well, that's the album. I haven't listened to it yet, but I'm sure there's some great stuff on here, and I really like that sort of era of dance music. Again, £3 for this, but ever I looked online, I couldn't find it for less than £10 online. So to find it in the wild for £3 is worth it. And I'd say if you've got inklings, if you see an album online and you think that's too much, I don't want to pay for that. If you've got the patience and if you've got the time, it's always worth just waiting that little bit longer, whether you can spot it in the wild or if it comes down online. Because to only pay £3 for this and it to be pretty much in immaculate condition for secondhand, I can't just believe it. Now here's a really underrated artist from the 80s. This is Terence Trent D'Arby with his album Introducing the Hardline, according to Terence Trent D'Arby. This was a £3 purchase, and it's got a lot of his hits on it, like If You Let Me Stay, or it says it on the front, If You Let Me Stay, Wishing Well, and Dance Little Sister. Now, he's another example. He was big at his time in the late 80s, so £3 for this isn't bad at all. This is one that you might find at places like a car boot sale. Mainstream pop acts often appear at car boot sales, so you might be able to bag this for £1 if you're lucky. But again, you got to check the condition and stuff. This one's pretty immaculate. I spoke to the guy I bought this off. He said he has a machine, he cleans all his vinyl professionally, and from looking at it, you can definitely tell. Always try and chat with the vendors if you can, if they're not too busy or if you've got the time. Just talk to them about records. You don't have to grill them necessarily, but these sort of things like asking if there's a machine involved to clean them, it just comes up in conversation. Now then, this is Donna Summer with a very questionable cover, Another Place and Time. This is from 1989, because you don't know who Donna Summer is? Well, she doesn't look like that. She actually looks like that. Surprise. Don't think you can get away with that nowadays. Anyway, so this was a very late album for her. She was massive in the 1970s, the Queen of Disco no less, but this album sort of came as her career was winding down. Still successful in some areas, had a few hit singles, but it's not one you often see. To get it for 50p is a steal, because it's an example of, say, of an artist. This is one of their more, I suppose, uncommon albums. It did well, but I've never seen it in the wild until now, so it's another example. If you can get it for that cheap, do it. Right then, now we have one of the most popular bands that people like to collect for on vinyl, and that's Pink Floyd. And this is their album Atom Heart Mother. You wouldn't know it, but it's just a cow. Anyway, so Pink Floyd, one of the most successful bands in music history, and people still love to collect their music in all sorts of different forms, on vinyl, CD, cassette, you name it. There'll be versions of this people like to collect. This is a 1970 pressing, which is when it was released. I don't think it's the first pressing, I think it's the third or fourth from my research. I paid £5 for this, but again, well, to have a copy that was released in 1970, the launch year alone, for that much, is pretty damn good. And the condition of the record is perfect. The only thing that wasn't perfect, and I did check this before I bought it, but when I'm ever going to own a copy of Atom Heart Mother again, is this. The inlay has sort of been torn, you know, something stuck together. Now, I'm not too fussed about this personally. For me, the key is absolutely the disc itself. If it plays, does it look good? But if you are picky and, you know, you're picking up albums that are gatefolds or whatever, double check the insides. If you're not happy with it, don't buy it. There will always be more copies of albums like this around because they sold, you know, there's a lot of them out there. But again, just be careful with what you're buying. I'd say my estimations, if this was in like perfect condition, you know, there wasn't any rips, or if it was a, you know, early pressing like this one is, I wouldn't pay any more than £15 for an album like this. And my final purchase is actually a modern day purchase, and we have Adele with her album 25 from 2015. Now, this was a £3 purchase, and for a modern day vinyl, that is fantastic. Because if you want to buy new artist material on vinyl, like physically, a lot of places you can get that will be the mainstream stores like HMV and some supermarkets, but they'll retail from, you know, the lowest, I don't know, £15 new upwards to about 30, 40 for some of the crazy ones. So to get this for essentially brand new for just £3 is an absolute bargain. That's what I like about record fairs. You see more and more vendors are bringing music from current artists as well. And record shops are doing it, to be fair, the independent shops are too. So if you are interested in new artist music, you know, check out HMV, check out all of them first, but also check out your independent record stores, check out your record fairs, because there's a chance you might snag something like this for a damn sight cheaper than what the mainstream stores are offering you. And those were all of my purchases from the recent record fair, and again, you can pick up all those great albums for decent prices at record fairs or independent record shops, depending on their prices. And now this is where I'm on about the research. As a vinyl collector, when I started, when I was 17, 18, I was sort of all over the place. You know, if I saw something I liked, I'd buy it, sort of regardless of cost, which is really stupid in hindsight, you know, regardless of condition and cost and all this sort of stuff. So I'd pay a couple pounds for, say, a record that didn't play properly, or I'd pay too much for an album that was really common. All sort of beginner's traps. So here's what I'd advise that you should do. The main hub, I think, for vinyl research is the website Discogs. Now, Discogs, you type in any album, any single, whatever it is you want, it brings up a whole list. It brings up every pressing that's documented, whether, say, it's in mono, it's in stereo, if it's an original pressing, a reissue, a modern release, it's got the year it was released. So you can pretty much track what kind of pressing or version of an album you have. And when you do said research, it will tell you the lowest amount that it's sold for, the median amount that it's sold for, the average, and the highest amount that it's sold for. Bear in mind that's only what it's sold for on Discogs, but I found in my experience the prices they throw up are pretty accurate. So say typically, for example, I haven't actually looked, but say the average price for Adele's 25 is £15 on Discogs. That should tell you that, you know, £15 is a typical going price. That seems to be what people are paying for. The highest they might want to pay is 20, but they're probably the bigger Adele fans, or they might have bought it when it just came out brand new. But the lowest it's sold for, say, is £7 or £8 on the website. Now that can say to you as a collector, if you're out in the wild or you're looking to buy off Discogs, because you can buy records off there as well, that can point to you and say, right, that's the lowest it's sold for. Am I prepared to pay more than that? Or am I prepared to pay about that price? Do you know what I mean? So if you use Discogs as like a buyer's guide almost, sort of what I'm indicating there, you can get a pretty good idea. As I've said, it's not 100% accurate. It's going off what has been sold on Discogs, and sometimes that, you know, people want crazy prices for things. It just depends who's got copies of what and who's selling. But that's why you shouldn't just rely on Discogs. Discogs you can buy off as well, but it should mainly be a tool for the research. I think the best way to find the records you want, honestly, especially the ones that aren't super duper rare, is to just go out to car boot sales, go out to your independent record shops in your area, go out to record fairs when they're on. If you just Google record fairs in your area, there'll probably be a list that comes up or something. Because I found record fairs in particular, I found so many records I've been after for ages. Like I say, one of those Bucks Fizz albums, the Black Box album, I've been after those for years now. And to find them in the wild like that is incredible. So I hope you've just enjoyed, and I hope you stuck to the end. If you have, congratulations. I hope you've enjoyed this little guide into like the world of record collecting and sort of beginner's traps to look for. Always check the condition of the vinyl, no matter what it is. Check that disc, look out for the scratches, look out for excessive dust or scuffing. Obviously, if you're picky about the packaging, look into that as well. Just all these little things you can do to make sure you're getting the best deal and the best quality in your records as well. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. And if you know anyone who collects records or wants to collect records, please share this video to them. It might help them out. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what sort of stuff you guys collect, or if you have any tips of your own. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new with notifications on. And until the next one, I will see you guys next time.